I was never more at home than I was in battle.
You may not necessarily be aware, but there is a thing called the pulp revival, or the pulp revolution, depending who you're talking to, that has been going on for some time in what, for want of a better term, we'll call speculative fiction. This is in part the kind of rebellion against the stifling social justice narrative that's present in a lot of fiction. It's also partly, in a way, kind of recapturing and seeking out the glories of this past fiction. And in part, it's also a reflection of the fact that publishing has opened up in a way that it hasn't in a very long time. It may not necessarily be as profitable, but the bar to entry for getting your fiction, getting your stories and so on out there, thanks to print on demand and ebooks, the Amazon marketplace, and so forth, yeah, it's never been as open or as easy, and so there is this flood of stuff out there. Much of it trash, which is true of how things were in the pulp era as well. There was a flood of stuff filling these magazines, much of it trash, but it paid more. And you know, there were plenty of diamonds in the rough. We're all familiar with some of them. H.P. Lovecraft, for example, Robert E. Howard for another example, maybe E.E. Doc Smith as another example. You know, we're familiar with some of these, but we're not familiar with lots of others. They're not necessarily obscure to people who are aware of the history of science fiction or are steeped in it, but they're not known to a lot of people. Carnacki, for example, isn't hugely well known, and there's plenty of other examples that we could go to. So there has been this kind of pulp revival going on for some time now, I guess since 2010, maybe a little bit before, but it seems to be picking up speed as it goes along, and this is a very good thing. Now, not to toot my own horn, but I kind of predicted this and tried to get things moving about this quite some time ago, and I wrote a collection of short stories called Pulp Nova, which is a kind of re-examination of the tropes and subgenres of pulp fiction, but written with a modern eye. And recently this got reviewed, and recently this got some Amazon reviews, I think by the same person who did the review, who managed to be quite insulting about what I had done, while at the same time confirming all my choices. And what's unfortunate about the pulp revival, in a way, is similar to what's been a bit of a disappointment about the old school renaissance in tabletop gaming, and kind of similar attitudes that have emerged. It seems to have somehow become this kind of iconic thing for more conservative voices in these arenas, and I share with them a concern about the socially conservative attitudes that we see exemplified in the Hugo Awards, or in a lot of the kind of themes and attitudes that we find present in a lot of modern fiction. The social justice is so thick you could cut it with a spoon. It's just really stultifying. But unfortunately, in this review and in the commentary that a lot of other people have made, I see a similar stultifying aura of political correctness just coming from the other side. In my stories, I took these pulp tropes, but I examined them with a more modern eye, in the way, say, Warren Ellis did in Ignition City, or in some of his other work as well. He's examined pulp tropes. I believe he did a series of comics examining pulp tropes with a modern eye in a similar kind of semi-cynical way to the way I did. But the idea that this kind of cynical, violent, nasty spin on these pulp stories doesn't fit with the pulps, or demonstrates a lack of understanding for the pulps, just doesn't make any sense to me. The original pulps are absolutely chock full of horror, violence, nastiness, thinly veiled kink, if veiled at all. All kinds of horrendous things. The characters in the pulps are often not very nice people at all. Conan is a thief and a pirate and a liar and a murderer and an assassin and an implied rapist. For example, the vigilantes that were so common. I mean, take the Spider. He wore a horrifying disguise. He would poison people. He would mark his kills so that people knew that he was the one who did them. The early versions of Batman, who was very much derived from the pulps that immediately preceded him, would straight up shoot a motherfucker. These characters are not nice. They're not moral paragons. They have moral certitude, and that is a horrendously dangerous and horrible thing for people to have, because it allows them to act in these horrendous ways. And I think this critic, and I think people who turn up their nose at more modern interpretations of pulp fiction are mistaking ethical behaviour for moral certitude. I mean, Tariska Godwin, the Nazis had moral certitude that what they were doing was right and proper and the thing to do, and it's that certitude that allowed them to murder millions of people and launch a war that engulfed the world. Moral certitude is interesting to examine, and it's ironically a big problem that the social justice proponents have. But it doesn't make you right. Being absolutely 100% convinced that what you're doing is right is probably a good sign that you're probably not. I think sane and sensible people have doubts. But my point here is that this hypercritical review, while it was good in some ways, I mean, it praised my actual skill in writing, my efficiency of language, my characterization, all that kind of technical side was very good. The side of it that criticised my take on the pulps does not marry up with my experience of reading the pulps, or my experience of reinterpreting them, through a modern gaze. I'm not reinterpreting them through a social justice gaze or whatever. I'm just stripping the scales from the eyes and showing how horrendous in many ways this pulp fiction was. But that's what's so good about it. It just throws stuff at the wall and saw what stuck. It was wide open, it was experimental, it was crazy. It didn't shy away contextually from the sex and the violence, and they were full of freaks and weirdos, and it's just shorthand. It seems odd to say, but of visual storytelling through the medium of text, and that's the thing I was going after. That kind of throw things at the wall, see what sticks, not care what people thought, but to still look at it through modern eyes, through my gaze, my vision. So the best bad reviews I've ever gotten, but if you want to judge for yourself, go ahead and buy the book. Zang.